because we will be able to hear you. My name is Julia Meyer, and I am the Executive Director of City Club, and your stand-in moderator, probably until Colin Jones, the President of City Club, gets here. His Lyft driver went the wrong way. Before we dive in, I want to give you a little context about who City Club is, what we're about, and how tonight's program will go. City Club was founded in 1916 by a group of young leaders who felt the city was not responding to the needs of everyday people. More than a century later, we're building on that legacy by bringing together a diverse community to spark change across our region. Through trusted research, open dialogue, inclusive programming, and advocacy for our best ideas, City Club is working to make Oregon a place where everyone can thrive. To everyone who supports City Club, thank you for helping us live these values as we continue to work toward a more equitable Oregon. As always, near the end of today's program, we will have a moderated Q&A session. Anyone in the room may write a question on a note card. When your question is ready, hold the card up and City Club staff will collect it before or during the Q&A session. For those of you who tweet, follow along, join the conversation, and ask questions using the hashtag FridayForum, even though it's Thursday. No worries. Tonight, we'll be hearing from all of the candidates currently running for a seat on the Portland Public School Board. While candidates run for a seat from a particular geographic zone, they're elected citywide. All Portland voters will get to cast a vote for each seat, so if you're not registered to vote, you need to do so by next Tuesday, April 30th. Ballots will be mailed Wednesday, May 1st. Election day is Tuesday, May 21st. The candidates include, in Zone 1, Andrew Scott, running unopposed. In Zone 2, Shanice, Clarke, and Michelle DePass. In Zone 3, Amy Kohnstamm, Deb Maher, Mayor, and Wes Soderback. Okay, and in Zone 7, Eilidh Lowery, Eilidh, and Robert Schultz. Welcome. Shanice, you'll be joining us shortly. Amy Kohnstamm, you have to leave a little early?
I do, yes.
Okay, anyone else?
I need to leave right at 7 or a little before.
Okay. To open our debate, each of you will have 60 seconds for a statement. Once the opening statements have concluded, we'll move on to prepared questions. Every candidate will get 60 seconds to answer each formal question. There will be no rebuttals. If time permits, we will do a lightning round where each candidate will get 5 seconds to answer a question. Just reading it. When we've completed the prepared questions, we will take questions from the audience on note cards. If you have a question on a note card, please just hold it up at any time during the forum and staff will collect it. At the end, each candidate will have the opportunity to give a 60-second closing statement. Candidates, we have timekeepers with us today. They will indicate when you have 30 seconds left, then 15 seconds, then when you need to stop. For those in the room today, I'd invite you to snap your fingers if you hear something that catches your attention or if you think it's a particularly important topic. However, we do ask that you refrain from clapping or cheering during the debate, as it's important that everyone hears from the candidates without interruption. That said, I will invite applause twice during the evening, and this is one of those times. Please join me in thanking and welcoming our candidates. So are we doing 60-second openings? Okay. 60-second opening statements. Wes.
I'm Wes Soderback, running for Director 3. I was born and raised here. My family's been here for about 100 years, more than 100 years. And my brother went to Portland Public Schools. My parents went to Portland Public Schools, and my dad worked for 30 years, Portland Public Schools, and he died from asbestos that he got while working for the school district. That's it.
My name is Amy Kohnstamm. I'm also running for Zone 3 for the Portland Public Schools Board of Directors. I was born and raised in Portland, went to Portland Public Schools kindergarten through high school. My husband and I have 3 sons who have all been educated in PPS, 2 who are still in high school. Since our oldest son entered kindergarten, I've worked as a classroom volunteer, advocated statewide for funding with every legislative session since then. Started to get involved in citywide issues, including leading the equity grants process for the Portland Schools Foundation, which took me into our highest poverty schools around the district. And that was when I really saw that the education that my children were being offered in public schools on the west side was really markedly different from what was available to kids all over the city. So that's what inspired me to run originally, to make change, to make sure every child has access to an equitable education. And I believe that we're on the verge of great transformation in PPS, so I'm running again to help lead that change.
I'm Deb Mayer, also running for Zone 3. I've lived in Oregon for 10 years, and Portland for 10 years. You might say I got into this race for the money. 4 years ago, the race cost 2 candidates over $300,000. That's a ridiculous amount of money to spend on a volunteer school board race. This time around, nobody wanted to step up, so I did. That's one money problem. Nearly $200 million has disappeared from the bond budget. An audit has revealed that we don't know how it disappeared. Was there malfeasance? I think that's a fair question to ask. So I'm calling for more than an audit. I'm calling for also an investigation. It's a problem that we need to solve. The other money problem is that there are budget cuts, and we need to keep an eye on how that money is spent on student services as well. I'm very frugal. I know how to budget. I live on Social Security check, and
Your time is up.
I would welcome the chance to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Andrew Scott. I'm running in Zone 1 for Portland Public School Board, and thanks everybody for being here tonight and for City Club for hosting. Voters pamphlets came out today, and so there's some longer statements in there from all of us talking about why we're running and our websites as well. What I actually want to focus on tonight a little bit here in the opening and also in some of the questions is public trust. And I think that the district for a long period of time has lost the public's trust. That's through some spending decisions, through operational decisions, through budget decisions, through the achievement gap. And but I also think, as Amy and others have said, the district is at a turning point. We do have a new superintendent. We have a new leadership team. We're going to get new board members. And I really believe PPS can be a world-class school district. But in order to be a world-class school district, we need to regain the public's trust. And I hope we get into some of the reasons and some of the hopes that I have that the board can bring to that to help regain that public trust. Thanks very much.
Good evening, I'm Michelle DePass. I'm running for Portland Public School Board. I want to introduce myself and ask for your support. This school board race is important and it'll have great impact on our kids and our community. I think there are 3 things that you should look for in a school board member, and I bring all 3 of those qualities to the table. First, you should elect someone who's committed to children. For example, I've taught business basics to 5th and 8th graders over the years, led outdoor recreation for low income and kids of color, taught algebra to formerly incarcerated youth, and of course I volunteered in my own kids' classrooms. Second, you should elect someone with experience and passion for doing the school board work. That primary job is to help prepare all kids for college, career, and life. And lastly, you should elect someone with a proven record of accomplishments in Portland and in the district. One of the things I'm most proud of, for example, is connecting our immigrant and refugee neighbors to affordable housing policy decisions that directly impact them.
Greetings, y'all. My name is Shanice Brittany Clarke, and I am running for the Portland Public School Board Zone 2. I'm a Portland educator, community organizer, and I spend every day on the front lines with students. My work with PPS communities has led me to run for office. I've had some personal hardships that led me to not complete high school. And I know for many PPS students, this is a reality. 76% of students who don't complete high school come from low-income families in PPS. So I'd like to center retention efforts for staff, restorative practices for students, and wraparound services for families. My postgraduate education and educational leadership and educational policy experience give me the capacity to do this work. I think we all deserve better representation on the board who reflect experiences of both youth and educators to inform policy.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
I'm Eilidh Lowery, and I'm running in Zone 7. My name is hard to say, but no matter how you pronounce it, I know that I'm going to be good for kids in PPS. The reason that I'm running is basically that I got angry last year when there were changes made to the middle school schedule. And I started advocating for music education. I'm a long-time volunteer. I volunteered throughout the district in art and reading and math. And as I started to advocate for performing arts education last year, I started asking questions and following information to the source. And what I really found was that I believe that I have the skills and question asking ability that are needed on the board. Someone with a deep heart for students who has spent, like Shanice said, a lot of time on the front lines, and someone who really is curious about how we can be better. And I'm running because, like Amy, I am very hopeful that we are in a place where PPS really can be a world-class district.
I only hope to be as on time as the rest of everybody. So I was up at Deer Island getting bees, chatting with a fellow small business owner, kind of coming up, talking about Portland, talking about schools, and it was interesting to hear the City Club's mission about the needs of everyday people, because ultimately those two things, listening to people in my community and feeling like the needs of everyday people are not being seen, felt, or met by Portland Public Schools, inspired me to run. I have 3 kids. I've dealt with the SPED services, special ed services, 504 plans, timer, and a variety of the support systems that I feel like are broken. They don't listen to the parents, they don't listen to the needs of the kid, they don't listen to the needs of the teacher. That's what I feel like is the most broken in Portland Public School. Oh man. So I decided I'd throw myself into that. Sorry, I'm very informally dressed, but I literally left a farm and came here, so sorry. 5 seconds. Oh, what do I say in 5 seconds? I really like people and kids, you know, whatever.
Thank you. So to start, I'd like each of you to presume that you are elected to the Portland School Board next month. Now, imagine it's 4 years later, May 2023. What will you have accomplished in your first term? And we're gonna start in the middle and then kind of swing around. So Andrew, I'm gonna ask you to go and then we'll kind of come about this way.
Great, and 60 seconds.
60 seconds.
I would want to see 3 different things. I would want to see progress on the achievement gap. The district is not educating children of color up to their full potential, and we need to make some progress on that, set some metrics, and hold the district accountable for achieving those. I'd want to see another bond passed. That gets back to that public trust issue. When we see some of the issues with the current bond, and as the district's working through those, we will know if we've restored public trust if we go back out to voters and ask them for an additional bond and they pass it. That's really essential if we're going to rebuild and modernize our schools over the next 20 or 30 years. And it's really incumbent on the board and the district to do everything we can to be transparent and build that trust, because, again, the future of the school facilities rely on it. And finally, that we budgeted sustainably. I was the budget director for the city of Portland for 10 years. I budgeted through the Great Recession and coming out of it, so I have quite a bit of experience in this area, and the district needs to be looking 5 and 10 years down the road in terms of how we budget so that we can get off the fiscal roller coaster.
Michelle.
He stole my answers. I, after 4 years, would absolutely want to see some progress on the achievement gap, which is one of the main reasons I'm running. I'd like to see a second bond passed where we have that comes in under budget and on schedule, that produces world-class facilities that are equal across the district, that have equal benefits across the district. And I'd absolutely like to see more teachers of color hired, more people of color in leadership at the district level, and just a closer alignment, our policy alignment, racial equity goals with what we see on the ground.
Like Andrew and Michelle have mentioned, I have a committed investment to the bond coming up in 2020, and something that I would implement immediately if starting next month and looking 4 years out is implementing a community benefit agreement process. So before this bond gets on the ballot, we have a space for community members, folks who are developing the capital projects, and major key administrators in PPS to be able to collectively build up what this is going to look like. Also, retention is an issue that I would be focusing on. So looking at our onboarding practices, looking at our training practices to support special education and folks who need some more support with socio-emotional needs in the classroom. So doing things like curriculum development and training and institutes for our leadership, principals, and teachers. Those are things I would implement.
So I think that there's some consensus so far that definitely, as we look at equity and the way that PPS is failing students of color, that's a priority. As we look at our buildings, and having been in several school buildings, seeing the state of some of them and how our students deserve better, that bond is key. I think two issues that I would be very proud of to work on that are sort of part of my things I'm really passionate about are comprehensive sexual ed. We are not following that law at this time, and I know I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I know the sort of low-grade level of sexual violence that occurs on a regular basis in the middle schools, and I think that we need to be teaching all of our students how to handle this time of middle. If any of you were awkward in middle school, it's still true, kids are still awkward in middle school, and how to handle that. And then the other piece is arts education. The NEA has done tons of research on the way that arts help close the achievement gap, and I think performing and visual arts are key to our success as a district.
All right. You guys all have great answers. Now it's on to me, huh? So, not a politician, you'll have to excuse me for that. Last night, I was doing the whole Facebook scouting thing, you know, where you're checking on your friends. 10-year-old had his head gashed open 3 inches by 2 inches down to the skull, bullying in a grade school. He's 10 years old, his 2 little brothers, he tells them, run home. I would like to see in 4 years that we have at least a reasonable response so that a kid walking home with his little brothers isn't attacked by an older classman. He was attacked by an eighth grader. I think the inequities in the classroom are a common message from all of us. The preschool to prison pipeline, I think we in Oregon and Portland specifically need to interrupt that in the most intense way that we can. And I think drawing awareness to it and constantly talking about it is part of that. I would love to see more people like Michelle and Shanice running in 4 years. That would be pretty awesome. You see such a slim field, and I think it should be more robust. This is a very important seat, and I think more common folk and more people of color should be running for it. I don't know, I had no more seconds. You can always hold the sign up too. Yeah.
Well, I would hope to see in 4 years that Lincoln and Benson get finished and occupied and up and running. These are, Lincoln's 125 years old today. 150, excuse me. And of course Benson is, depending on who's doing the counting, it's over 100 years. That doesn't end the upgrading of the schools, however. Another thing, I would like to see CTE introduced in all the high schools, not just Benson. And I'd like to see the graduation rate move upwards. That's a test to see how the rest of the system works. More people graduate, That means people down below are doing a good job.
So, in 4 years, I'd like to feel that every single family in PPS has faith in their neighborhood school, and they have faith because they know that all kids are being well served there. Kids with disabilities, English language learners, kids with dyslexia, just that every one of our schools, every one of our classrooms can serve all the incredible diverse needs that our kids show up with. I would also like to see that we've had stability of leadership over the 4 years leading up to that, so that we can build on the momentum that is just beginning in PPS. I'd like to see our kids a higher graduation rate, as Wes said, but also that our kids are really graduating prepared for whatever their next steps are, whether it's college or career, but really well prepared. I'd also like to see greater partnerships in the community, with the city, with the county, with the state, with the business community, with our volunteers, where our whole city is invested in the well-being of our kids. We need to build that.
Okay, in 4 years, I would like to see the board put into place an operating system that works for PPS. Right now, I understand that it's kind of chaotic, and we need to fix that. And parents need to be privy to what that operating system looks like, what that structure looks like. There also needs to be transparency and oversight and accountability for the decisions made by the board. There also, also I think it's very important that we get more teachers of color and just people of color, not necessarily teachers, in classrooms, so that students of color feel more welcome at school. And the last thing is, I think we need to make sure that the decisions the board makes are educationally viable. And I bring expertise because I have 40 years of experience in education.
Your time's up.
And I'd like to be able to use that. All right.
Thank you. Before we move to specific policy and issue areas, I want to help ground us with a set of questions about how each of you understands and approaches issues of equity. So we're going to switch up the order a little bit. For Zone 2 and Zone 4 candidates, what does equity mean to you, and how is it different from equality? And we're going to start with Shanice, then Michelle, then Robert, then Eilidh.
Equity, for me, is when power is equally distributed and resources are equally distributed to all folks. And I use the word equally, but I mean that communities with higher need and vulnerable folks are centered and brought forward in ways that they don't actually receive. So equity for me is meaning that not everybody starts at the same starting place, and we recognize that and give the proper tools and supports to lift them up. Equity for me is something that I center in my practice and in my work, and using tools like the racial equity lens to do every single process and policy as something that needs to be continuously happening with PPS.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. What does equity mean to you, and how is it different from equality?
Okay, so equality is distributing maybe the same resources to everyone equally. Equity is the idea that you're distributing resources according to need. So rather than giving everybody a pair of size 10 shoes, you're giving the people that need size 10 shoes. You're fitting the, I'm sorry, I need to start over. You're centering the people whose voices are least heard, and directing resources to where they have traditionally not been allocated, and you're not equally it's not an equal distribution. In other words, in my work with the Housing Bureau, we use a racial equity lens to look at addressing the housing crisis, look at addressing gentrification in North and Northeast Portland, bringing people back to Northeast Portland. We use a racial equity lens, so we know that The data that we use to feed our decisions is centering immigrant, refugee, communities of color, because the need is actually greater in those communities for housing in particular.
So
Yep.
equity versus equality, right? For me, you know, a child in Montebello walking to school, going through a school day and walking home should have the same experience as a child in Lentz that goes through the same process of walking to school, going through school day. And I don't think that's happening now. In fact, I know it's not. So for me, equality would mean that the system is considering the wealth of this neighborhood and the needs of that neighborhood, and equity compensating for some of that through extra services or a focus on where the failings of this school that has a very diverse immigrant population isn't being serviced with language, and diverting extra resources there, inviting cultural, what I would say, icons into the classroom. Ask the preacher from the local church to come into the classroom and read to kindergartners. I think these are the ways that we can achieve equity and equality. Of course, I have no more than 10 seconds. Man, this is tough. Sorry. I was better the last time I was in front of one of these. I apologize.
So I'm a United Methodist pastor, and the way that I encounter equity and equality in my daily life is often with my elderly parishioners who are trying to decide what to do with their wills. And often they will have children who are financially well set and a child or two who is not. And so they're trying to decide, do I divide my estate by 4 and give everybody 25%, or do I give to my child who's unemployed more, and will there be resentment? And I think we struggle with this notion of what fairness looks like. And so that's a conversation I have with my parishioners. I think we talk about resources in schools as a place where we look at how do we meet that need and where do we give to shore up the educational experience. But I think that equity also has to do with power. And it's not just like the resources of finances or the resources of staff. It's how do we treat one another, how do we see one another, and how do we use that racial equity lens in our relationships. I think of white parents and teachers at a predominantly black school and the conflicts there that I put up.
Thank you. For our Zone 1 and 7 candidates, what curriculum changes might you support to ensure better outcomes for marginalized students? We'll start with Amy, then go to Andrew, then Wes, then Deb.
So, first of all, we've seen in Portland Public Schools really a lack of a uniform curriculum across all subjects, across schools and grades, and that has resulted in really inequitable opportunities for students, no matter depending on what school they're in or what classroom they're in. So I think a part of it is making sure that we have a strong standards-based curriculum that all of our kids have access to in all of our schools, and of course with strong teachers. Also, we've worked on at the state level and also at the district level ethnic studies as part of our curriculum, which is in the process of being implemented, and that's incredibly important that kids are reading literature and seeing textbooks that reflect their own lives and their families' experiences. And also curriculum that recognizes, that is able to adapt to every student's unique learning needs, and that all teachers are well prepared to be able to adapt to each student's individual needs, and that's something that also has been lacking in PPS.
And that's tonight. Andrew, what curriculum changes might you support to ensure better outcomes for marginalized students?
Great, it's a good question. I think, as Amy mentioned, focusing on culturally, sensitive curriculum and ethnic studies is important, but not just for marginalized students. That's for the entire district, right? And we need to be doing that for all of our students. I think, and I actually wonder if the curriculum question is missing the boat a little bit. That I think what we need in some of these underperforming schools or schools that have really failed these kids is a way to incentivize our best teachers to be at those schools and stay at those schools and get some stability. I mean, these are challenging environments, and we really need to figure out a way that we can bring our best resources to bear for those students, because again, part of this equity conversation is through that resource allocation. That's money for schools, but it's also bringing our best talent to those schools as well.
Great. Wes?
Well, we need a standard core curriculum. However, having said that, not everybody learns at the same rate or the same way or anything. So you can't just use the cookie cutter to stamp out the student. The voters just passed a suggestion on, they called it CTE, they called it STEAM, STEAM. And that's mandated, but there was no money with it. So that's what I would implement.
Thank you. And Deb?
I think the first thing we have to do is realize that there are different ways that kids are smart. There are many different ways that they can present their intelligence. And what we concentrate on is testing them in two ways. Their math ability and their language ability. We need to get away from that. I come from a school, it was the first school to put multiple intelligences into the theory into practice. We recognize all of the intelligences that kids had, and when you open your mind up to something different like that, and recognizing that kids have all kinds of abilities and use authentic assessment to evaluate them, school is a really wonderful place to be, and that's what will get kids to achieve higher.
Thank you. So you started to touch on this, but let's talk more specifically about issues of student achievement. So for our Zone 2 and 4 candidates, a huge disparity exists within PPS, where some schools have 80% of third graders meeting math or reading benchmarks, while other schools are at 30%. Some schools boast a 90% graduation rate, while others at 70%. What would you do to address these achievement disparities between schools in the district? We'll start with Michelle, then Robert, then Eilidh, then Shanice.
Sure, and that's a great question. I'm actually have real experience with this. My neighborhood school, third graders are meeting reading standards at 12.5%. Alameda School, which is a short bike ride away or 10 minutes away, has 74.5% of kids are meeting those standards, and we know how to close these gaps. We can start by supporting the teachers that are trying to teach, by providing paraprofessionals in the classroom, counselors, disciplinarians. Currently, teachers have to do everything. They're the librarian, the art teacher, the gym teacher. I think if we support teachers in carrying out the work by having paraprofessionals, we also have community partners such as my friend Duncan Campbell at Friends of the Children has a very successful mentoring program that turns out I think something like, they all graduate from high school, and many of those kids that are mentored for 12 years go on to graduate from college. So we know how to do this.
Thank you. Robert, what would you do to address achievement disparities between schools in the district?
I think that oftentimes when you look at these issues, it's tied to economy, and I would first ask parents to try to step in more and recognize their issues that they're trying to kind of overcome to be able to volunteer in the classroom. If you're working paycheck to paycheck and you're living hand to mouth, you don't have an extra 2 hours to go to school and reach kids. And again, asking folks from community leaders to step in and reach kids. And I think that just involvement and engagement of parents and community leaders is the first step. I think there's many, and I think there's a lot of research in alternative methods to achieve this that are not being explored globally. We don't have to look within our state and find a thinker over here to come up with some of these answers. We can look globally to where these other cities, states, and countries have dealt with this very same issue and bring that research forward to help overcome some of these. I'm sorry, I don't have a great example right off a 10-second answer, but I think that's where I go.
Thank you.
I did earlier said Shanice was next, but.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, please.
Yes. So I definitely am centering this issue, working on the campaign and recognizing that 19% of Black students are at reading level, and we learned that through the Secretary of State audit. So centering early literacy initiatives and getting supports are a priority. So I know the Student Success Act is focusing some efforts on the early learning initiative and things like child and parent programs, relief nurseries, Head Start programs are going to help folks. And I recently learned on the doors about, knocking on the doors about a program called 1,000 Books Before Pre-K. So just really investing in partnerships with libraries and our city officials and county officials to create more programs. And culturally responsive practice and work is also going to support getting or solving this issue too. Thank you.
So I think, as been raised before, the core curriculum is essential in how we support our teachers with a vital, vibrant reading curriculum to help with this disparity of only 19% of our Black students being on reading level by 3rd grade. I worked with Success by 6 when I ran AmeriCorps in Yakima County, and I know how vital those early childhood development programs are, and I've seen those benefits in closing the achievement gap in Yakima County. I also think we have a lot of students throughout the district that come to school with trauma. I have a student I work with who often will just go completely still because she doesn't feel safe. And so I think that I think Michelle maybe mentioned counselors and how vibrant and vital and important that is to be helping our students be ready to learn, and those kinds of things need to be in place to really help us close the achievement gap, and supporting teachers, including EAs, and developing more resources in the classrooms.
Thank you.
So we're going to switch to our Zone 1 and Zone 7 candidates and take a slightly different angle on achievement. There are some students who are not as well served by the district, particularly students of color, students with disabilities, and students from low-income neighborhoods. What specifically can be done to better ensure all students are reading at grade level by 3rd grade? And we're going to go Andrew, Wes, Deb, then Amy.
So I think first and foremost, we need to ask experts in the field. I'm not running as an educator, and so I don't want to pretend to be one. The district hires and staffs people who do know the solutions to this. Parents also can be part of that solution, and we should look nationally at other districts who are successful here. There is a lot of data out there. There are programs that work. And so I think that's one of the things that I will bring to the board. I've spent 20 plus years doing public policy and doing public policy analysis. And it's not so much having the answer when you start as it is knowing the right questions and knowing the right people to ask to find that out. It is something that we really absolutely need to focus on. That is one of the metrics when I talk about seeing improvement on the student achievement gap or the opportunity gap, really is seeing those 3rd grade reading scores come up. And so I think we need to gather the community and the experts within the district to really figure out what the solutions are and then make sure they're adequately funded.
Clarke College across the river implemented a program. They had trouble with their freshmen coming in with writing a legible sentence. So they invented a course called Plain English Please. You got bumped into that, and you went there and you were given a stack of booklets, and you had to read them as fast as you could. As soon as you put one down, boom, they hit you with a test. And when you could get about 10 booklets a day, you graduated, they kick you out, and they put you in another room. So the point is that, I'm not an educator, and our educators have got 6 years of higher ed. I'm not going to preempt what they do, but practice makes perfect.
Thank you. Deb.
I think one thing we need to do is invest in libraries. Over the past decade, Oregon has lost so many of its libraries, and also along with those libraries, we've lost librarians who teach kids how to use the library, and they are so beneficial to schools in general, so that's one. Also, we need to listen to reading experts who will tell you that learning how to read on computer and buying canned curriculums to teach reading is not the most efficient and effective way to do it. I'm a reading specialist, and I have a lot of experience in this area, so I could bring that experience to the board. Also, I just want to say that whenever reading is taught across all curriculum in music and art and all of those things, it lifts everybody up.
All right, thank you. So when I think about that question, I think about what can the board do? And to Andrew's point, good public policy and good board governance is for the board to make the policy and the budget allocation decisions that support the right strategies from the professionals. And part of that is accountability on the board's part for making sure that they are in fact the right strategies based on best practices and actually making a difference for our kids that we can measure. So we have some examples of some really important board decisions in the last few years that's starting to make progress in that way. One of them is changing the way that we provide staffing to our schools. It used to be largely based on just enrollment, and of course our high poverty schools tend to be unenrolled, and so now we have a base programming at all of our schools regardless of enrollment, and then extra resources to make sure that all kids get the same opportunity. So that's a part of it, and I have to put in a plug as a voracious reader to just nurture the love and joy of reading. Thank you.
There are two specific barriers to achievement that we'd like to discuss in more detail. So first, for candidates in zones 2 and 4, both a recent state audit and PPS's own report card have pointed to absenteeism as a huge contributor to students not graduating. What can PPS do to better encourage and support students in showing up consistently? We'll go Robert, Eilidh, Shanice, Michelle.
What can we do to better support? I think to recognize the obstacles that teens face daily, the reasons they're not headed to school. My kids talk about smokers in the bathroom and not feeling comfortable using the toilet at the school. That's kind of an obstacle that makes them not want to really go. I think that's, again, looking at partnership, I think we're all on the same page about we need better partnerships citywide for supporting schools. And in the community, what are the kids doing? Are they at home on the Xbox in this online realm that adults at work can't really interact with and don't know what's happening in? And is that contributing to the crime and violence and bullying and the opposite, that feeling incredibly awkward when they step into a classroom environment where they're then forced to actually look at their peers and put their phones down? My boys report some classes where the teachers tell them to put their phones away, and they're like, but I listen to music. They have 1,000 reasons to have their device with them constantly, and I think it's a huge detriment to their classroom experience. And I think their lack to look across the room and like have a conversation. We've all been there. It was awkward when we were kids. Well, now it's added to by this online realm that overshadows anything they do in person. And I think looking realistically at what those contributors,
Thank you.
So I think part of absenteeism is from students not feeling comfortable at school or not enjoying the school experience, feeling like it's not for them. And there's all sorts of insidious ways that curriculum and our ways we instruct students kind of tell them that this isn't for them. My daughter was fortunate enough to start first and second grade with a teacher who really understood multiple intelligences and started to have a classroom where all sorts of learners were really valued. So looking at ways that we can implement that kind of strategy throughout PBS to help students feel valued in the classroom and that they want to be there. The other thing is the spark, the reason. My husband was not, he'll love the story. He didn't like talk to girls at all in high school, and he was a little shy and awkward, but band was what got him through, like music, and then he was like in a rock band as well. But it's those things that like make the rest of it survivable. And so how do we find those things that catch kids and make them want to be there so that they do soak up all the other pieces of school? And so investing in arts, investing in CTE, investing in STEAM, vital.
Thank you. What can PPS do to better encourage and support students in showing up consistently? Shanice.
Absolutely. This is an issue that communities have been talking about. I know that the Black Student Success Plan identifies absenteeism as one major issue impacting Black students in the area. I think of three different efforts or ways to address it. Wraparound support services, I think, is a way to look at a student's lived experience holistically. Housing assistance, mental health services, access to food, if food insecurity is an issue, thinking about those things as resources is necessary. And I also know at Buckman, there's a navigator program that, you know, works with folks who are showing up in different ways in the classroom and gives programming to encourage attendance. So we've seen attendance boost because of this navigator program and parents be more engaged. And also we need to motivate students with things like technical education, access to arts programs, and just specified opportunities like jobs.
The Black Student Success Program that Shanice referenced listed a host of issues that were particular to Black children in Portland schools, and absenteeism was absolutely at the top. I was lucky enough to attend 2 schools during high school that, had I not been at either of those high schools, I probably would not have graduated. One of them was the Metropolitan Learning Center, all ages. My mother called it Camp Run Amok, but it kept me in school. We had all kinds of classes ranging from how to change your clothes in the hallway to, you know, lots of experiential learning. I also attended Jefferson High School. Performing arts based, funded at that time in the 1970s at $300,000 a year. We had ballet and modern jazz troops from New York come and spend 3 weeks in Portland. They lived with various families in the Northeast Portland area, and they taught classes 4 days a week at Jefferson, and that kept me in school. So that's my own personal story, and I think that performing arts are very vital to keeping anything. There's got to be one thing for kids to.
Absolutely, thank you.
So we're going to move to candidates in Zone 1 and 7. Let's tackle another major barrier to graduation. Students who move from school to school and district to district in any given school year. What should be done to better support students who show up to the school district mid-year? And we're going to start with Wes, then Deb, then Amy, then Andrew.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Don't let them do it. We have sports teams and all that have to qualify for so much classroom, so much here. I think if you allow people to move around, they will move around, especially if they're not doing too well in school, you know, move to another school. So I don't know what you can do, you know. You want to go, you can't lock people up and make them go to school. A standard core curriculum introduced at each one of the Portland schools. So if that does happen, you have to move, that you could just fit right in.
Thank you. Deb.
I was one of those kids who moved a lot. When I was young, my family owned a farm in Kentucky, and when farming was good, we lived on the farm, and when farming wasn't so good, my family moved to the city so my dad could make enough money to keep the farm. So we moved back and forth a lot. And by the time I was in high school, I had gone to 16 different schools. There was never any doubt that there would be a school, a good public school for me to go to, no matter where we moved. And I always felt welcome. Things that we did in the past, we can do now. There are a lot of societal issues that affect kids being homeless, mental illness problems, those unemployment that we have to address. Those are things that schools really can't address, but we can make kids feel welcome at school.
So this is, you know, an increasing problem in Portland Public Schools, as so many of our students have housing instability, and gentrification is forcing them out of their neighborhoods and out of our district. So I do think that having a more uniform curriculum across our schools will make a huge difference in terms of kids coming into the same content from school to school. That may be different in different districts, but we can continue to work on building our partnerships with neighboring districts in terms of helping kids land without losing much schooling. I also think we need to recognize how challenging and traumatic it can be for students. And there are a lot of really beautiful student-led efforts to kind of reach out to the new kids. No one eats alone, you know, watching out for who's isolated at lunch. So I think that's a big part of it too, is making sure that kids' emotional needs are met when they're having to move from place to place. But this problem is only going to get worse in our community, so we really need to focus on mobility. Andrew.
Yeah, there are a lot of aspects to this. I think to the extent every school is performing well, it's going to be easier for the kids to come into that new environment. We know in the current situation that that's not necessarily happening. And I think, you know, getting back to some of those wraparound services, you know, what are the counseling services available in that school? You know, what are the other services that that child may need? Because the child is coming with trauma, having moved, and we need to be really aware of that. You know, as most of us have gone, you know, through at work, they call it onboarding. And a successful onboarding can lead to a successful job, and unsuccessful can really lead to failure. And it's the same thing with the kids. We need to have ways that we integrate kids into the school and give them the support they need. And you know, that type of effort can make all the difference for the child.
Let's move to talking more broadly about leadership and the board's interaction with the superintendent. For candidates in Zone 2 and 4, how do you see the role of the superintendent versus the role of board members? And when do you know a school board member is clearly out of their lane? We'll start with Eilidh, then Shanice, then Michelle, then Robert.
So the school board member's role is to hold the superintendent accountable to the direction and vision that the board has for the district. And, you know, evaluation is part of that. Looking at key metrics such as student achievement. It is not the role of the school board to manage, that is the role of the superintendent. And I think it's really tempting for those of us, I think everyone here who's running is running because they care. And I think those of us who care often would like to fix. And so it's tempting to move into those management roles and to step into this idea of wanting to solve things and wanting to be the superintendent. So I think those times when board members are taking on that management role rather than that clear governance, where we're setting policy, setting those budgetary ideas, and working with the superintendent rather than undermining the superintendent.
Thank you. Shanice?
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. How do you see the role of the superintendent versus the role of a board member? And when do you know a school board member is clearly out of their lane?
Absolutely. So the superintendent is the chief administrative officer, chief school administrator, chief executive administrator, and a leader of education for PPS and a custodian of our funds. School board members are responsible for creating policy, for evaluating the superintendent, and creating or co-creating that vision and goals that drive where our district is headed to solve issues. So having clearly defined roles of what the board is supposed to be doing and what the superintendent is supposed to be doing is important. Communication that's transparent and fluid is also an important aspect. But I would just end by saying it's the board's role to hold the superintendent accountable to making or achieving those goals. But absolutely, the day-to-day operations of schools are in the superintendent's jurisdiction.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, the role of the board member is to be a good governor and not to do the work with the superintendent. So the superintendent, as everybody else has already said, is job as a top administrator in the district. The role of a board member is to put performance measures in place to keep that administrator accountable, to set policy, and to oversee the budget. How do we know when the board member is out of their lane? When they're doing anything besides those very discrete things that I just mentioned. That includes, you know, showing up in teachers' classrooms unannounced and getting down into the weeds of the work of the teachers and the administrators that we've entrusted to do the work.
Thank you.
All right. Oversight, budget, program, I think these are the roles of the board. I agree. This is pretty, I mean, it seems pretty standard to me. We're not supposed to be over the shoulder, but we are supposed to be holding accountable the superintendent We get to fire the guy if he's not doing a good job, or a gal, she happens to be in the seat. So that's a big deal. We don't want to fire somebody unnecessarily, so we need to be present and aware of what's happening in the school system so that we can offer that kind of oversight to the superintendent. I believe we're also kind of watchdogs in the sense that community members should feel like they can approach us to advocate for big issues within the system and to offer them information or insight to issues that we are handling as a board. I don't think that is commonly present now. To get results from the school board or the superintendent is a very clunky process. Just trying to set up a 1 hour meeting at the request of the school, the superintendent with me has been a chaotic process, and rather it's sadly demonstrative of how poorly functioning the system is for communication with parents and even school board members at that. Thank you.
So for candidates in Zone 1 and 7, as many of your, what? Where's Zone 7?
They're 2.
Whoever you are.
They're 7, they're 1 and 3.
Excellent. 1 and 3. You let me go with that for a long time.
Yeah. Thank you for finally calling that out.
Appreciate it.
Our apologies.
So one of the chief responsibilities of the PPS board is hiring and supervision of the superintendent. How will you hold the superintendent accountable for student success? And we're going to start with Deb, then Amy, then Andrew, then Wes.
How will I hold the superintendent accountable for student success? Well, before the superintendent is hired, there are expectations in place. I think that the superintendent has to have the vision of the board in mind and the and follow their guidance. Whether the superintendent chooses to do that in a way that produces success is something that we will have to be vigilant about. And I wouldn't only measure success in test scores, I would measure success in multiple ways.
Thank you. Amy.
Can you just read the question again?
Absolutely. How will you hold the superintendent accountable for student success?
So clearly this is one of the most important roles of the board, and it's something that one of the reasons I'm running again is because I believe in this next 4 years we can really improve our board practices in a way that will make a difference for kids. If as a board we focus our efforts on student achievement metrics and on monitoring those and on holding the superintendent and his team accountable for those student-oriented goals, I think we'll really start to see a difference. I think in the recent past, we've seen the board involved in a lot of different things that aren't oriented around student achievement and student success. And I would agree with Deb that student achievement is not just a measurement of test scores. It's what our families say about how they feel when they walk into their school building based on school climate surveys. It's all kinds of different metrics, but a focused board is really key to holding the superintendent accountable for making sure our kids succeed.
Yeah, the board working with the superintendent needs to set those goals, and it is a collaborative process. I think we need to make sure that the goals that we're setting, the metrics we're trying to achieve are achievable. The district needs to have a vision and a strategic plan, which they're working through a visioning process right now. But once we agree on the direction, we need to work through what those specific annual performance measures are, and set them, make them very clear, and make them very transparent. I think most of us who get hired in a job, when I was hired by Metro last summer, I was given very clear direction of what to achieve in my first year. That is what the board needs to do with the superintendent. And then to the extent we aren't achieving those things, then we need to start asking the harder questions about why. Is it a funding issue? Is it a talent in the issue? A talent within the district issue? Or is it a management issue? And that really is the board's role.
The law says that the board of directors runs the school district, period. it doesn't say the superintendent runs the school district. Now, the board, 4 votes, they can censure the superintendent, or they can fire him. The trouble with firing them, they're usually on a long-term contract, you have to pay them anyway, so it's probably not a good idea to do that. But that's the way it goes. I don't know you can hold the superintendent responsible for students not paying attention in class, which is the biggest problem for achievement. Is, get the little darling's attention. But it's the board runs the show, and they ought to stand up on their hind legs and go for it.
Excellent. We're going to move and take some audience questions shortly. We have one more question. Bobby up in front is helping us coordinate that. But before we do that, let's dive into the budget and oversight of the district's finances. For candidates in the zones on the right side of the room, with much of the district's budget obligated to rising PERS payments and healthcare benefits, PPS is weighing budget cuts of 15 to 20 million, even as the PPS general fund budget increases by about 32 million this year. Recognizing that the central office can only absorb a few million of that at most, how will you determine what to cut from the budget and what to keep? We'll start with Shanice, then Michelle, then Robert, then Eilidh.
Thank you. So I would be using practical tools to, like the racial equity lens and racial equity policy to inform using equity, right? When we look at schools who are under-enrolled or have a lower number of experienced teachers, or the demographics that they hold, those are metrics that I want to look at to determine how cuts will impact communities in those different ways. So I know that we're losing librarians, we're losing ESL teachers and technical education programs with this current proposed budget. And those are things that I absolutely would want to protect as they impact the most vulnerable students, and those types of practices will uplift some of the achievement gap that we're dealing with and what the audit is showing. So I'm using the racial equity lens and protecting our most vital positions for student success.
Thank you.
And that's a really challenging question because while we care about student success and we know that budgets are very tight right now and we've got these potential cuts on the table, we still want to turn out kids that are able to compete in the 21st century marketplace. And so I have to go with what I value with this question. What I value are the core pieces of the ecosystem, which are the children and the teachers. I would also, like Shanice said, use a racial equity lens, which I think is something we forget to do, but use that lens to determine who is going to be most burdened and who will most benefit, probably no benefits if there's cuts, but who will be the most burdened, and elevate those voices and work to address the most vulnerable in the ecosystem.
Thank you. Robert, how will you determine what to cut from the budget and what to keep?
Firstly, the system provides data, a review of the data. Secondly, looking outside of PPS at our biggest critics and kind of taking into consideration what they think are horrible decisions that historically PPS has made or operated under. And I think developing creative partnerships to try to offset some of our expenses. We have tremendous after-school programs like the Robotics Club and Ultimate Frisbee. These should be credited in some fashion, even if partial credit. And I think looking at those kind of partnerships and giving academic credit to some of those kind of programs, we can find ways to make cuts that make sense while still holding programs that need and must be maintained. I absolutely agree. When you look at schools that are heavily minority or poor, that's the worst place to cut. It should be the last on any list of any kind of cuts. So,
Thank you.
I would agree with the racial equity lens and looking at those places where our schools are clearly failing our students, where our system is in crisis, to protect those as we make cuts in places where there is maybe a capacity for parents to absorb some of that through enrichment activities. And I give the example of when music cuts were made, there were a lot of people in my community who could afford to get private lessons for their students, and there are other schools where that's not the economic reality. I think a bigger piece of this question though is if we talk about PERS and the amount that that's taking out of the budget, how do we work with the state to increase funding? I was a public school student in Salem-Keizer before Measure 5, and we've never really fixed some of the damage that has been done by our state laws. So looking at how do we as board members lobby for tax increases? How do we lobby for increased funding for our schools so that we aren't in these positions of making these horrible, really difficult decisions? We can't have all of our students succeed if we're continuing to fight over scraps.
Spot on time, thank you.
Thank you. So for the candidates closer to me, Portland voters can be very generous, but they expect PPS capital bonds to come in on time and on budget. Given the current shortfall of $250 million or more in the 2016 bond package, as a board member, how will you ensure that promises made during any bond campaign are delivered on time and on budget? And we'll start with Amy, then Andrew, then Wes, then Deb.
So as a parent volunteer, I started working with a group of parents to pull together a campaign for a 2012 bond campaign. 2011 had failed, and we realized we can't let this go down. We need to modernize our schools. And so we put together a campaign that I was really proud of, that the city supported, a great program that was well managed by the district, delivered, almost complete now, on time, on budget. And I believe that's why the voters passed the 2017 bond, because they had seen that work well managed, and the district had kept the voters' faith. So the situation we find ourselves in now with just skyrocketing construction costs, some of the highest in the nation, combined with unfortunately low estimates at the outset, has left us with a gap. But there's no question, we will deliver, the district will deliver, and the district has to keep the conversation with the community about regaining trust so that we can continue to invest in our schools, because we can't leave Jefferson, Cleveland, Wilson, and all of our elementary schools hanging. And I want to say I'm really sorry to miss the question and answer period, but I have to run out now. Thank you. Thank you. Andrew.
I think I'm the only one up here who's upset I didn't get the budget question, but the bond question is a consolation prize. I think it's really, we talked about public trust at the beginning a little bit, and one of the things in government, having been in government most of my career, when we do 10 things right, we gain just a tiny little bit of public trust, and when we do one thing wrong, we lose all of it, plus some. And it's really important that when we're talking to voters and we're talking to residents of the community, that we're really honest about what we can and can't do. I think the reality is that had we gone to the voters and said, we can do Madison, we can do Lincoln, and we can do the planning stage for Benson, voters would have passed that bond. And we would have been in the situation we're in now, and they would have said, good job, you're on time, you're on budget. So what happened there, and there's a lot, and we need to definitely diagnose it so we can fix it, but we overpromised, and that is the kind of thing that kills public trust and makes it really hard to go forward with the next one. So fix the issues that happened, be transparent about that, and then don't overpromise for the next one.
Thank you. Wes.
Well, I'm not sure that sounds good. 10 years ago, I was told that Benson High School, along with Jefferson, and are going to close. Jefferson, that's where my parents and their siblings went. Benson is where the rest of the family went. And so I got together with some of the alumni, and we formed a group. We've worked on it for 10 years. Our alumni included attorneys, have included accountants, financial experts, all Benson graduates. And we worked on it for 10 years. And I'll tell you, from working on the inside from the outside, that bond issue is going to have to, somebody's going to have to look at that.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. So we are going to move to some great questions that we have from the audience. Oh, excuse me, I am so sorry. My apologies.
That's okay, I will.
Please, dive right in.
This is the question I really wanted.
Oh, then seize the day. Absolutely. My apologies.
Okay, first of all, I'm just shocked that we find ourselves in this situation, because you're talking about 25%. And you can ascribe skyrocketing construction costs and other things like that to, to maybe part of the problem. But it seems to me like there's something else going on here. There must not have been transparency or oversight, the things that the boards is responsible for. And I think we need to do an investigation to see what happened, because we've had an audit already and the audit didn't provide any information. That's an awful lot of money. 250 million is what you just said, is a lot of money to have just disappeared. We need to find out where it went so that we can fix the problem, because if we don't know what happened, we can't fix it. Thank you, Deb.
Okay, great. It is actually, audiences, I really apologize. I'm very excited about the audience questions. You've asked some really fantastic questions. Thank you. So we'll do this to be able to tackle some more of these. We're going to split up the zones on that side. And so zone 2, Shanice and Michelle, and zone 7 will take different questions. So let's start with zone 2. And the question is, what actions will you take to engage the public in PPS issues? And this questioner says, especially parents who do not speak English or have multiple jobs and don't have time to attend events like this. Michelle, do you want to start us?
Yes, and thank you for that great question. I am actually a community engagement specialist for the City of Portland Housing Bureau, so I have a lot of experience here. Not everybody can make a meeting at 6 o'clock on Tuesday. I recognize that. PPS does a great job of translating materials into the top, I believe, 10 languages, but they don't do a great job of engaging the community. And that's the entire universe of stakeholders that includes students, families, teachers, staff in schools. And so I would propose to hold the meetings at hold meetings that are accessible, whether that's a different time, whether that's in a different location than here. With traffic now, we need to consider where we hold meetings and if people can get to them, and maybe holding them during the day at high schools. Hearing the voices of the high schools, I think, would greatly improve the operations that we're talking about today.
So I would be highly invested in getting a language justice team. And my work doing community organizing, we sometimes do that. And we have interpreters, folks who can help with materials, and having an audit or inventory, if you will, of all of the languages that are represented in the community. Also, reaching out to parents at home, calling them. That's something I want to do and just continue to do as a board member, to communicate updates and engage folks. Having childcare at meetings, also having off-site meetings in their home communities. I think that PPS board meetings should move from time to time to be more accessible when we do updates that are critical throughout the year. So having virtual and in-person opportunities for engagement and reaching folks at home.
Thank you. We'll move to, and we'll do this with Eilidh and Robert. What do you see as the role of technology being in a 21st century school, and how would you resource it effectively?
So do you want to go first, me?
Yes, please.
Okay, and I'm just going to say it's Ailidh.
Oh, thank you.
It's okay. It's like I said, it's got a silent PH. It's a weird name. Scottish Gaelic. So I volunteer with third graders who are on Chromebooks on a regular basis, doing curriculum for both reading and math. And I think it's essential that kids be learning how to navigate that, how to use Google Docs, because that is what sort of needs to happen to be functioning in the world. I do think that there are some concerns around technology. I've had experiences sitting with students as they've done this work where the curriculum they were using was racially biased. So for example, there was a question that put the word in the sentence that makes the with the question was a Somali Muslim student who their family doesn't eat processed food and they don't eat ham. So when we're using technology, I think it's that double-edged sword of helping students prepare for navigating the world and ensuring that the curriculum and the processes we're using are viable for all students to feel like the technology is for them.
Thank you.
Want to give me that again?
Yeah, what do you see the role of technology being in a 21st century school, and how would you resource it effectively?
Ideally, every kid would have an iPad and have smart technology in their classrooms and be able to use their virtual classroom when there's snow days, so that they don't have these huge negative impacts to not being in the classroom for a week when it snows once a year. I realize that economically that's not a realistic option across PPS. But I think if you're saying like what would be ideal, I think developing a partnership with local tech companies, recognizing that we're training in PPS their future employees, and really driving that home of what we have locally with shoe manufacturing that's being outsourced that we can be doing here in town, and really connecting that to the classroom experience that should be part of the natural evolution of students in town. You want your kids to be able to live in the same city and work in the same city, and yet somehow our education is not connected to that. That would be one arm of connecting technology to the classroom. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you.
I'm not a politician.
So I'm going to ask the same question of Zone 1 and 3. So Andrew, Deb, and Wes. And the question is, in what ways will you seek accountability from the community members in your zone? Maybe we'll go Andrew this way.
I'm assuming have they really be accountable, not people accountable, that's what you mean by that. No, I mean, I think it comes through part of that outreach and engagement. So one of the first questions you asked in this round, and I don't know if that would take the form of a newsletter or sort of some sort of meetings out in the zone. I do think it's really interesting. Well, we have to be in that zone and represent the zone. We also get elected district-wide and have district-wide responsibilities. But I think, I guess I would take it back to that overall engagement. It's one of the most important things the district should be doing, and I think we have been failing to do. And one of the things that I would note is, as we talk about administrative budgets versus teaching budgets, it sounds easy to cut administration, but administration is things like professional communicators, engagement specialists, people who are actually doing that outreach into the community. And so I think when we make hard budget decisions, as the board is doing right now, and as we're going to have to do if we get on the board, we really have to ask the question of when we talk about administration, what does it mean? The district needs a lot more engagement, not less.
Could I answer the technology question instead? Because I've done a lot of work on
You're
that.
welcome to address that in your closing. It'd be great if you could address the accountability question now.
Okay, the accountability question. I have lots of networks at the local level and the also at the state level and at the national level. So I have lots of people to get information from, and using that information to hold, to be accountable, and to have conversations with people about what the board's doing, and it's a two-way street. Am I being accountable to the people that I serve, and am I doing my due diligence on the board, and having those conversations and meeting with people will help me to do that.
Boards being accountable.
Let me read it again. In what ways will you seek accountability from the community members in your zone?
Is that my accountability or their accountability?
I'm thinking it's probably the former.
My accountability.
Yours.
Oh, well, I guess it doesn't hurt to go out and visit the neighborhood. I think by running for office, you pretty well, your constituents can pretty well tell if they want you or not, and they can vote you out. That's how you hold them accountable.
We have time for a lightning round before we move to closing statements. And so we received some encouragement to put a finer point on the budget question. And so this will be basically a 2-word answer from each of you. And the question is, as PPS looks at these significant multi-million-dollar budget cuts in the next year, what is your higher priority? Maintaining class sizes or maintaining instructional days? As you look at massive budget cuts coming in the next year, what is your higher priority? Maintaining class sizes or maintaining instructional days? And where did we start for opening? Which side? Great, then we'll go the opposite direction. So we'll start with you, Robert.
Class size or instructional days? Gosh, I'm gonna go with instructional days.
Thank you.
Class size.
This is hard, class size if I have to choose.
I would say class size.
Instruction days.
Class size.
Instruction day.
Thank you, and also for totally following the rules. I almost never see that. That's amazing. Thank you. So that does bring us to closing statements, and so you each have, I believe, 1 minute to close us out. We will start in the middle with Andrew, and work that way and form a full circle.
Great. Well, thank you again to City Club, and thanks for everyone for coming out today. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I have been frustrated by the district over the last decade or more, given some of the inequities within the district and given some of the spending decisions and other lack of things that have caused public trust to decline. But I am optimistic. I really do think we can have a world-class school district. I think we have really great teachers. We have, as I mentioned, a new leadership team, and I think we can have a board that holds everyone accountable. I'm a product of Portland Public Schools. I have 2 kids in the schools right now in 5th and 8th grade. There are a lot of really good things happening in the district, but we need to figure out how to get those really good things throughout all the schools equitably throughout the entire district. Thanks again for coming out, and I look forward to talking to you more.
So thank you, City Club, for having us. I'm also a PPS grad. I am a single mother of 2 PPS kids. And 4 generations of my family have either retired or currently work for the district as teachers or support staff. I've been endorsed by the Portland Association of Teachers, Stand for Children, For Children's Future, which is an organization comprised of former PPS school board members, Governor Barbara Roberts, Senators Lou Frederick, Abel Gordley, Senator Margaret Carter, just to name a few of my supporters. Vote for me because I'm committed to the kids in this district, in this community, and I have relevant experience and the passion for doing the work. I also have the time to do the work right now. Thank you.
I have rich experience advocating for policy change, programming for students, and research to support student retention. Being on the front lines with students and educators is something that could really change leadership and perspectives that the Portland Public Schools board, that's normally there. We deserve a chance for a board member with a value for organizing communities, who's accountable to those communities, and who's transparent with those communities. I have been endorsed by PPS teachers, APONO, labor unions from PCC, Oregon Working Families Party, former Senators Abel Gordley and Bob Boyer, Representatives Bynum and Hernandez, to name a few. And I absolutely think investing in my leadership is a way to uplift the needs for stability in the district, empower students, and unite our staff.
My first name is Eilidh. E-I is A, the L-I is Lee, and the D-H is extra. And if you mispronounce it, it never offends me, but I will correct you. There are 2 ways to get on the ballot for school board. One is to pay $10 and fill out a form, and the other is to get 25 signatures and fill out a form. And I chose to get the 25 signatures. I actually got 30 because I'm a little bit of an overachiever. And I did that because it was really important to me that my running for school board is not something I'm doing for me. It's something I'm doing as part of my community, out of a deep care for the students of this city. And so I wanted from the beginning of my campaign to start with that deeply grounded within the community. There are a lot of folks in my community who are supporting my run. I'm also supported by Rep. Bynum, the Portland Association of Teachers, NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon, which I served on a board as a board member for them for a number of years. And I'm just very excited to be able to be part of making our schools excellent for all children in Portland.
I think that most of us are saying pretty much the same stuff, right? When we talk about the racial inequity and that we'd like to make it better. I think some are in a better position. I'm a big fan of Michelle. She's my favorite. Sorry, everybody. She's my favorite. Right? I would love to be in a position on the board to support someone like Michelle. I think a unified board is absolutely critical to address some of these issues that we've been talking about here tonight. We've heard it very eloquently addressed and not so eloquently by myself. But ultimately, I think that that Portland Public Schools needs to be changed, right? It needs to be adjusted. You guys here at Portland City Club did an assessment of our form of government and found it failing, right? Our commissioner form. Well, I don't know that the same assessment's been properly applied to Portland Public School Board. It's clear when you have folks saying they're spending 60 and 80 hours doing this volunteer position that something's broken. And when you have these races, as Deb points out, where they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this volunteer position, something's wrong. We need more people up here. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Oh, right, you know, I hope nobody from the outside looked at this. I think the school district is going down the tubes for sure. We still got a very fine district, and most of the teachers are great teachers. Most of the administrators are great administrators. Now, what we need to do as citizens, we need to help them. We need to let them know what you want. When they ask your help, you need to help them. You got bond issues coming up. Somebody's going to have to pay that, and so get up there and get going. I had a barb thrown at me saying too much money. Hey, that's the way things are. They're too much money. But anyway. Hug your teacher.
Thank you. Close this out, Deb.
For many years, I taught a class at Indiana, University of Purdue, University at Indianapolis called Methods of Inquiry. In order to enter the School of Education, pre-teachers had to pass my class with a C average or better. It was a great class. I taught scientific method, interviewing techniques, and how to use original research. Basically, I taught students how to be curious and how to ask the right questions. We as candidates are all very different and will serve the board in different ways. I'm asking you to be curious, to find out who we are, and to ask the right questions. Whose values do we represent? I have the endorsement of the Network for Public Education and members of several grassroots organizations that I'm very proud to represent.
Thank you. That is time. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your schedules, for being patient with my over-enthusiasm for audience questions and mispronunciations of your name. Thank you all. Please join me in a round of applause for our candidates. Finally, I want to thank Bobby Regan and Lisa Collins for producing today's program. The work of City Club is not possible without our volunteers. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening.